Hi, good everyone. Paul Hoelen here, Tscharke, and we have the magical guest with the best here in the known universe, Mr. Eric Bennett. We were just having a discussion before the show. I actually had here maybe even longer than Eric's at one stage, so
wow.
that was in a different universe.
You're gonna have to see some pictures of that, Paul.
Got a little bit more flow and colour than mine, but yeah.
Anyway. Yeah, a few tie-dye shirts as well and stuff like that. Or...
Oh, hey, thanks for taking the time to come out. Eric's live to us from Utah, and morning time for us, evening time for Eric. Eric's a family man, so he's negotiated some time away with the crew, which is really thoughtful of him. Hopefully, no one's going to get too mesmerized by my groovy background here tonight. I just thought it was a little bit more pleasant than
reliving some memories from a couple of weeks ago, is it?
Yeah. Anyway. So Eric's just recently taken out the Photographer of the Year in the inaugural Natural Landscape Photography Awards, which is no small feat and
massive achievement.
It's judged by some of the greats. So and
the number of entries as well. It's massive.
Yeah, was it almost 14,000 entries? I think.
That's crazy.
And I think what I personally really love about that, Eric, is, and why I entered as well, actually, to support it, is the ethos behind it really sits beautifully for me personally. Like having a timely and really quite accessible platform at its price point for image makers that are quite happy to keep everything that happens before the shutter's pressed sort of more in the foreground than what happens after, and also ultimately giving nature the loudest voice rather than our own kind of personal post-production effect or visualization sort of techniques and post. And I don't know, how do you feel about the ethos of that, and how does it feel to sort of rise to the fore with your body of work that already has a lot of those aesthetics?
Well, that was a huge surprise that I ended up taking the overall award. Like, I never entered the competition with that kind of intention or hope or expectation at all. Like, it just totally came to surprise. But what is nice about it is, like, I'm not too big on competitions. Like, to me, if I lose a competition, it doesn't mean anything to me. So, like, if I win, it doesn't really change the way I feel about my work either. So in that regard, like, I'm not too worried about winning competitions or things like that. But if there was a competition to win, this is definitely the one that I would care the most about, because I really liked what they were trying to do with it and how it was so different from other competitions, and that the images that win or that are awarded, people can feel confident knowing, like, none of it is like fake or maybe a misrepresentation of what the photographer actually saw. You can kind of know that it's all legit, just straight out of the camera photography, which it's not like one is better than the other or more artistic than the other. It's just, there's already competitions for people that want to do really heavy post-processing or composites or digital art, but there wasn't really a competition for people that didn't want to be doing that, but be kind of evaluated on a level playing field, right? Because, like, it's kind of hard to compare like a composite digital art type image with a very intimate, more simple scene that, like, just came straight out of camera. Like, they're just not really the same medium. And so I feel like that was the coolest thing about the competition. That's why I wanted to support it. So I don't have anything against post-processing. Like, it was kind of hard to choose images to enter, because some of the ones that I kind of felt like would be good competition photos didn't really qualify, because I did some minor warping to improve the composition, like the visual flow, or I maybe cloned out a few too many things where I thought it might not qualify. Because I'm really big on eliminating distractions. And sometimes you don't want to move stuff in the field because you don't want to disturb the landscape, but also the image just doesn't work with those kinds of distractions in it. So you got to get rid of them one way or another. So it's not that, like, all of my images are super just like straight out of camera with very minimal processing. I teach post-processing to people, and I have tutorial videos that show, like, all of my post-processing, so people will see that I do kind of stuff on both sides of it. But Yeah, I think it's cool that people can feel confident, like there were no tricks done on the images that were awarded, or anything like that. It's all real and everything. Anyways,
Yeah, no, on the same boat as you, man. It's a little bit like apples and oranges when you're competing in these other sort of arenas. Yeah, I mean, I
Very
personally don't.
disillusioning, isn't it? When you like
Well, it's. I had this interesting thought when I was reflecting on these awards, because, and I had this interesting thought where this competition feels like you're standing next to someone when they took the photograph, like physically in the landscape, whereas some of the other competitions are more like you're in somebody's mind rather than next to them physically, and so you're more present with their creative vision rather than the actuality of the landscape. And as you sort of quite clearly recognize, there's a place for both, but I guess what I was most excited about is not as much of a place in that particular realm of competitions, in particular in the world, until this has come along. There's been a couple of renditions where people have had a bit of a go, but nothing. And I'm quite curious as to why, inaugurally, it's already become one of the biggest competitions in the world, and it's its first year. It's like, how did people even know? And I know because we had Tim and Alex on the show actually last week, actually talking about it the week before, and they had Matt Payne and his sort of f-stop collaborator base, and so they had a European and a American base to kickstart it with, I think. But I'm quite curious if it's already gone that far, if it might actually become the biggest contest in the world, and if it does, what does that say about the culture of landscape photography and what people are either sick of or looking for?
Yeah, I think I've noticed maybe in the last year or two kind of a turn towards more thoughtful photography, and people trying to be creative in the field with their perspective and the way that they see nature, rather than trying to just take a mediocre or ordinary image in the field and then make it crazy and creative in Photoshop. So I feel like people are being more mindful now in their photography and focusing more on like visual elements, and maybe even like more abstract photography is kind of becoming popular again, because I think naturally as artists, we want our work to stand out, but people went so far in like post-processing and like adding tons of light, boosting saturation, just turning the volume all the way up, like in Photoshop, that there wasn't anywhere else to go. And so now people have been going in the other direction. And I think that's really cool, because I can just see people thinking more about it, being more deliberate. And ultimately, since we're all nature photographers, we're going to create a deeper connection with nature the more we're observing it and trying to see different things that other people wouldn't notice.
Yeah, one thing that really struck me, Eric, we might actually look at your folio just after this, if you bring it up, Lucky, is there's a lot of voice for the quieter scenes that have come through here, and intimate scenes and subtle hues and the kind of images that a lot of people will just walk past. And the fact that and it's that softer voice often gets a bit lost in the realm of the social media in particular, where people are trying to create a loud voice to grab people as they're coming past and stand out from such a volume of material. And I feel like that's not necessarily to the betterment of the genre or the craft, personally. And there's cultures, there's phases, there's evolution, and that's kind of an exciting part of being part of it. And and you've got the skill set to do both. I'm not much of a post-producing whiz at all. In fact, it's pretty rare I even open Photoshop at all. But yeah, like we maybe well, if you're right, if we just whip through some of the photos and maybe
Absolutely.
Get some backstory, I imagine
great idea.
a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I was just going to say one other thing with what we were talking about. Like, I've been shooting intimate, like quieter scenes for the last 3 or 4 years pretty heavily. And back on Instagram, like before the algorithm kind of really reduced like the engagement that you get on your posts, I would post like a wide angle scene and it'd get like 3, 4, 5,000 likes or whatever, tons of comments. And then I would post like an intimate scene and it just like flop, like get no attention or traction at all. But now, like even posting those same images that I posted years ago that got no engagement, on Instagram now, which the engagement has been throttled back a lot from the new algorithm and everything, I noticed that those scenes actually get more engagement than like my wide angle stuff. So it's really obvious that things have changed because there's just a genuine interest now. And that doesn't really influence my photography at all, but it's just something that I can't help but notice. Like, it's just kind of funny to realize that.
Getting a bit more thoughtful in what they're putting out there, and that, you know, I think one of the thoughts that came up when we're talking with Alex and Tim was that, you know, everyone's done the wide angle scenes. It's quite easy, you know, they get replicated so much, but you can do your own intimate scenes and create something that no one's ever seen before.
Yeah, and they'll never find it either.
Yeah.
There's no reference to.
I think there's a lot more scope to put yourself into the images in intimate based photography and abstract based work. It becomes a lot more personal.
Yeah.
And reflective of you as a person or an artist. Whereas a grand scene is a little bit more about the scene. And then
it's not as specific. You're not like zooming in on that one thing that you really liked. You're kind of showing the whole scene with that little thing that you liked. You know, it's way less specific.
Well, I think it's harder to put your own stamp on a grander scene because the scene's got the louder voice. Whereas on an intimate scene, it's so directed and you know what you choose. That already that's a huge part of the conversation. So look, I was actually going to, can you open up the Natural Landscape Awards?
Yeah, let's do that. Excuse me.
Do the sort of folio and it's sort of, it was kind of nice for me to pop up on the radar on the awards too, Eric, for that reason, because I shoot pretty straight and the image that I shot is basically a raw file. I don't think I did anything to it. I might have probably less than 10 seconds worth of post on it. And it's kind of nice because I'm often competing with, even in the aerial world, with heavily composite sort of work and really fantastical kind of stuff and mega saturated work. And it's just like, it's kind of like, how do you have a quieter voice in a maelstrom of loud voices, you know? Where the heck is that? Can we go back one? Like,
something kind of funny with this set of images that I won with is if you go to that next image of the aspens, so that actually wasn't one of the images that I won the award with. What happened is this one was part of a project that I submitted, which was like trees from all around the world, which was in the runner-up for like best project. But since I got the Photographer of the Year award, it was disqualified. And so the image that was actually in this place for the Photographer of the Year was a starfish image I have from New Zealand. Like in terms of ratings and stuff, like that was in my winning portfolio that the judges gave me the award based on. But then they swapped it out with this one afterwards because they thought it was like more of a landscape image and the other one was like maybe a little too wildlife. But it's kind of just a funny thing that people don't know about.
Yeah, they did mention that they were open to sort of promoting images and things like that, or changing what was represented in the folios to sort of suit the competition, which I thought was quite interesting. So there's almost a curation aspect that the organisers are doing in that case too. But I guess it's not telling any lies. It's something you entered, but it's a different thing. Yeah,
it's a different category.
There's aspects of the competition, I think, where, you know, if you win a certain thing, then like you said, if you win this, then your project is out of the running, or
right.
So they have sort of like rise to the fore, go down the other side sort of type elements to it. One thing I think I really enjoyed about this competition in particular was the transparency of the process, like and being given your every single image that you entered back with, you know, a clear judging sort of process of where it got through and what it got scored, and that's actually really unusual. How did you feel about that?
I thought it was pretty cool. I thought it was cool that, like, instead of being so strictly like tied to the numbers, they kind of would review things like over and over again, because a lot of times when you're seeing these images by themselves, you're going to give them a different kind of rating than you would give like the set of images together. So I think it's cool that they reviewed things multiple times. And I think at the end, when they decided the final awards, they had like a 6-hour meeting, which is pretty crazy, where they were really discussing and arguing about it and trying to figure out, like, you know, despite the the ratings that each of the images had received and like the actual like data that they had gathered, it was more kind of just the overall opinion of who they thought should get each award. So I think it's kind of cool. It's a bit more personal like that, you know, not so rigid.
Yeah, we have a bunch of print-based competitions over here, Eric. The Australian Professional Photography Awards and the New Zealand Professional Photography Awards are all purely live print-based panels where there's 5 judges judging it live, and it's a very interactive, dynamic, kind of real life situation. And I've been judging there for 10 years, and I don't think I've learned more about photography in general than sitting on those panels. Because I'm sitting on the panels with people that have totally different viewpoints from me, totally different levels of experience, totally different backgrounds, and some of them are the best at what they do. And to get into that actual debate process is incredible, because you don't know what's going to come up, and you don't really get insight into being influenced by what other people have seen, by them having the opportunity to share it with you, or to see their point of view, or to understand the art reference that they're coming from, or the homage to somebody's work, or the narrative that we might not have seen, or the technical understanding of the way a certain image has been captured. And you don't get that when you're just judging at home on a screen, just punching in numbers. There's not much to be influenced by the other judges. And so the score gets influenced, but also you personally get influenced by the insight that you get. So I'd be interested to check in with those guys about how much they learned from each other, actually personally, through that process. Because I get the sense that a lot of those guys are in connection with each other and have relationships with each other as well. And I wonder, I'll chat to you about that in the show a little bit. Well, actually, maybe I'll ask you that now. In terms of, like I watched your interview with Alistair Benn, actually. And I have to say the part 2 was pretty painful, man. We'll get to that later about your book. Oh my God. But I did get a sense from that there's a real sense of international community, and this competition has sort of bridged the British and American kind of aspect of that quite strongly. And I didn't realize till I was listening to that exhibition that there's already quite a strong bridge there by the sounds of it. That a lot of you guys in the States have a strong connection with those British guys already. And where did that sort of come from? And what's that all about? And where do you see that going? It sounded like Alistair was even planning on coming over, having trips with you guys already, and pulling everyone together physically.
Yeah, that'd be awesome to meet him in person. I couldn't really say, but for me personally, I found out about those guys just because I enjoy tasteful, classy photography. So I just saw their images and started following them. And then once you follow a few people from like the UK or from Europe, you kind of find other people that they shoot with and stuff like that. And so, yeah, over the last couple of years, I've just started following those guys just based on their work. But they're all super nice and they have a cool attitude towards photography.
There's this is something we'll probably explore a bit more with Tim, Parker, and Alex when they come on their own shows. But for us, and I guess for me, and even Nick and Luke, we've made comment that a lot of the British-based photography does seem a lot more based on subtlety and quieter voice and subdued tones and more camera craft based sort of imagery rather than, you know, heavy-handed post and loud work. Is that something that you recognize, and do you see that kind of transferring over a little bit onto the American scene, which to us from afar is a lot more influenced by the grander, louder kind of 500px kind of influenced, fantastical sort of scenes, and this sort of contest seems to be bridging a gap between the two.
Yeah, I definitely see that for sure. And I think sometimes it's even like that, you know, in Europe or in the UK, like to a fault, where they kind of believe that like just because something is intimate, it automatically makes it better than something that's not. Whereas I just shoot a wide scene or an intimate scene just based on the landscape, just what it dictates and what is required to portray what it is that I'm seeing. So I'm not going out thinking like, oh, I'm going to shoot a bunch of intimate scenes today, or oh, I'm going to go shoot a bunch of abstract scenes today. Like to me, that's a secondary thing. Whereas sometimes I think some photographers kind of make it the primary thing because they think that it being intimate or abstract or wide is a characteristic that kind of gives it more value as opposed to like the visual elements or the scene itself or the lighting. I don't really see one being like better than the other. like I said before, more artistic than the other. I just, I don't really try to be a certain way. My work just ends up looking a certain way just based on what the landscape dictates, what I need to do in order to convey what it is that what's calling my attention.
Yeah, I to be fair, I mean, the States has access to some of the greatest grand landscape scenes on the planet, and Britain quite simply does not, relatively speaking. So to me, it makes sense that the landscape has actually shaped the culture to some extent of the type of work that comes out. I don't know, have any thought about that, but between like the States versus over there, like in terms of the landscape itself having its influence and shaping of what comes through?
Yeah, I think that's true for sure. Because out here we have so much variety. There's like a really diverse range of landscapes. Like we have amazing coastlines, we have amazing mountains, we have the most incredible desert in the world, in my opinion. We've got the East Coast, which is, very forested. We've got Alaska, which is just like some of the most insane wilderness in the entire world. We have everything. We got glaciers, like we've got everything over here. So I think that definitely is reflected in all the work you see coming from the US. Like it's just such a broad range of subject matter and images. Whereas, like you're saying, your environment, we are definitely products of our environment, especially as artists. We can only be inspired by what's around us. So I think that's definitely going to change the way that we approach, in our case, our photography.
While we're on this website, before we move on to yours, is there any particular story or background or any image you'd like to speak to or think the viewers might want to know about in terms of that folio?
I already talked about that oil one on a podcast I did recently with this guy Darren. He does the Irish photography podcast.
The icicle one, is it icicles?
There's not much of a story behind that one, but yeah, those are icicles.
I feel like he could be like underwater or something. It's like,
yeah,
and it looks so delicate, and it's hard to get a sense of the scale.
So that's my favorite thing about shooting tighter scenes like this, where you don't show anything else around it that could give it context. I love how you're asking questions. You're asking me where I took it. You're asking me if it's underwater. You're asking me how big is it. That just implies that it's a very mysterious scene. And I love creating that mystery whenever possible, because it just makes images so much more fascinating without doing extra, post-processing tricks or anything like that. It's just, this image took very little processing. All I did was add a little bit of contrast, brighten it a little bit, clone out a tiny bit of sensor dust that was on there. Like all of the effects that you see here were done in camera and just using the natural lighting.
Must have been a kid in a candy store in there. It would have been amazing.
Yeah, I shot quite a few images in that spot, but I only used one because I feel like if you release too many images of like the same subject or scene, it kind of dilutes the best one. So I just stuck with this one. But yeah, that's one of the reasons I love shooting scenes like this. I just love creating that element of mystery.
Yeah, I mean, you probably noticed that about that my work as well. Is on the same. I like to take the context away, take the horizons away, take the sense of scale away, and just give people a few rabbit holes to go down or a few avenues to reflect on in terms of interpretation. But
yeah, your stuff is incredible, Paul, and I'm stoked I get to talk to you. I just I'm kind of hurt that I had to win a competition until I was asked to be on here.
Oh no, we're actually talking about it beforehand, but
I missed that last comment. What was that?
No, I just said I'm hurt that I had to win a competition until I was asked to come on here.
Oh no, we had you on the list over a year ago, man. It's been really hard to get the US guys on the show. Like they're like slippery fish. And Alex has said yes, TJ said yes, David Thompson says yes, and then they all just kind of disappear. So you basically you got on because you replied and actually followed through. So we're hopefully gonna get more access to those guys, because I mean, I get excited. Like the beauty of having a show like this for us, Eric, is we get to delve under, the minds and the insights to work of some of the great people in the world, and how else do you get the opportunity or excuse to actually knock on somebody's door and do that? Because they'll be like, oh, who are you, man? Like, I'm not going to tell you that. So it's been a real treat. Luke and I started this purely for the love, really, about a year and a half ago now, just 6 shows over COVID, just to keep all our community and friends kind of safe and alive in terms of their well-being, all being shut down and locked away. And it's just kind of carried through. And if anything, we kind of feel like we've got more momentum than ever, and we just love it. But yeah, one of our treats is to be able to, just build community internationally, I think. And that's something that's I'm really keen to do personally. And we're pretty excited about getting some of your crew on it. I think you've just given us our show list on your inspiration page there.
That's right. It's a beautiful list of photographers on there.
Like, oh yeah. I probably know maybe 2/3 of those. There's certainly some names I don't know there that I'm quite interested in. And then it's a big question, but could you describe how some of these people made it onto this page, or what they represent for you?
Well, most of these guys like Jimmy Geckis, David Thompson, Ron, Sarah, Alex, most of them I'm friends with in person. So I've gotten to get to know them through photography, and I'm friends with William Neal now after working on my book together. Other people I just kind of found, like Kristen McQueish. I found her maybe 6 months ago or a while ago, like during the pandemic, and I was just blown away by her work. Like, it's so original and so beautiful and just very classy, very deliberate and everything. And so I had to put her on there. Just any of these guys that are, or girls that are putting out awesome work that I find inspiring, like, I'm happy to share that with other people. And then Guy Tall is probably my biggest inspiration if I had to choose one. Like, I just love his work. It's just, everybody on this list is great, but there's something about Guy Tall and also his writing, which is incredible, that just I really resonate with.
Tell us a bit about your writing too, because I've noticed, you've got quite a lot of articles and different pieces that you've done. Is writing also, like, do you see it as almost a companion to your photography as well?
Yeah, absolutely. There's I try to like tell as much as I can about the places I visit in my photographs, but sometimes there's just a bit more information you can include that I think will help people appreciate places more, because I'm a huge reader. And so I'm always learning about, like, I'm always reading like biology books. So I'm always trying to learn about nature and understand things better, understand plants and animals. And
do you feel you do that so that when you're out in the landscape, you can actually understand what you're looking at?
Yeah, the thing is, I'm just a huge fan of nature. Like, not so much with photography. It's more just, I just love being in nature, and I love spending time in nature and connecting with it. And so if I learn more about it in books, like scientific books and stuff, I can appreciate things more. Like when I'm in a mountain range and I can kind of notice what things have been carved out by a glacier and kind of imagine that glacier being there, hundreds of thousands of years ago or whatever. And like, I can understand all of this process that created this place, from the very beginning. It's just, it just blows me away, and I can appreciate places a lot more now. Yeah, so it's nice to share that information that I gather from reading books in my writing.
Well, that's fantastic.
So I also understand you're pretty big in reading about philosophy as well. And how do you see that kind of influencing both your writing and your imagery?
I think learning about philosophy, it kind of makes me understand a little better maybe my place in nature. And so I think learning about the ego and stuff, and maybe trying to be more mindful and not get wrapped up in my thoughts, it's kind of helped me realize, like, I'm not as important as I thought I was, and that I'm really so fortunate to live on this planet and be in these places, and how really how respectful I should be of them, because I'm just going to be here for a moment, it's not fair that I would damage a place or something like that that's going to be here for thousands of years after I am. You know, I kind of want to have as little impact as possible, because just my significance is so much smaller than the significance of the ecosystems that I spend time in.
Yeah, in terms of the way you spend time, Eric, like I noticed you've done some huge trips, like 140-mile trips, and we don't do miles over here, but that's a hell of a long way, everyone. In case you didn't know, in one go. So firstly, how do you pull it off, or can you do that anymore as a family man? And then what's the influence that's different? I mean, to me, that's obviously you can slow down and be incredibly immersive and almost like physically engage with the landscape in a way that you can't do it on a shorter space of time. I have this saying myself, blood of the land becomes my blood. Like when I drink water from a landscape, it physically becomes my body over time. Like those cells replace themselves, and your body's 70% water. And
it's also when you're walking through it, it's all over you. It's like, you know, you really are part of it, because you're not having a shower or anything like that. So you are blending in pretty well.
But I mean, that's not something that everybody does or is motivated to do or has the time and space in their lifestyle to be able to do either, or the skills and fitness. Where do you see that place in the way you approach creating your imagery?
I mean, my main motivation for doing like long backpacking trips and stuff is just to immerse myself in the place and get to spend time there. And a lot of times it's just necessary in order to reach certain areas that are super remote. And that remoteness, like being in real wilderness where there's zero, human inhabitants and zero man-made things, it's just a completely different experience that is so rare today. And so that's my main motivation. Like, I just love being in places like this that are super far off the beaten path, where you don't run into a lot of people. It just has a feeling that is like no other. And so that's just kind of a requirement. It's not necessarily like, oh, I think I'm going to get better photographs if I do this or that. It's just the camera just comes along with me. And when there's awesome light, or I feel inspired to point my camera at something, that's what I do. But it's not based around photography at all.
I always get interested too in, if you're doing such a big trip, how, you have to obviously just take very rudimentary equipment because of all the other weight that you're carrying. Do you have a go-to sort of setup for a longer trip like that?
In terms of camera gear?
Yeah.
Usually anyways, I just have my camera body and 2 lenses, my 16-35, which I hardly ever use anymore, but it's there if I need it. And then my 70-300, which I use for like 95% of my work.
Wow, 95%. Wow.
And what's your the system that you're using at the moment?
Sony A7R2.
Oh, so you're using the 70-300, the small
Canon,
Canon one. Okay, interesting. Yeah. Cool. With a Metabones adapter or something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And then I'll have like 22 camera batteries depending on how long the trip is.
You need to go to the if you did upgrade the next step up, the battery life just changes dramatically going from the Mark II to the Mark III.
It must be a motivation to upgrade, man, because the battery life between the 2 and the 3 and the 4 is like chalk and cheese.
Yeah, I'm thinking about getting the 3 soon. I just haven't needed it in terms of like pixels or the technology. The camera, the A7R2 has been plenty, and it's been great in terms of the sensor and everything in the files. So
it's quite inspiring too that you're definitely not like me, where I always want to get the latest and greatest thing. It's nice to find someone that's very keen, just sticking with the same thing and knowing what works and just going with that too. So, and it's good proof case in point that it's got nothing to do with the equipment at all. It's all about the vision and the effort.
I used that camera once, actually. I was in the States. I was in Monument Valley, and I was meeting up with a microlight pilot called Chris Bradeen. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's an absolute gentleman of a guy, and he actually flies a lot of the Nat Geo sort of guys, and he does beautiful work of his own. And I didn't realize when I was setting up the shoot that I was going to have to wear this massive, big, heavy, full face helmet. And of course, you're out in the open and it's freezing cold, and you can't actually see through your camera view at all wearing this helmet. And I was just about to get on the thing and realized, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to shoot. And my older cameras had a live view, but the focus was terrible. And Chris is like, oh man, I got this ACR2. You don't know, it's mirrorless, so you can just look on the back of the screen and the focus is just the same. So I ended up using one for the first time and shot all the way through Canyonlands and Monument Valley and the San Juan goosenecks and from the air. But I haven't actually used the images because I struggled with the file structure and the color palette that came through with it. And I found it a bit tricky to sort of move it back to the creamier, more fluid kind of look that my Canon gear did. But
they improved it quite a bit in more recent Lightroom updates. The Sony colors in Lightroom. It was I always struggled myself, to be honest, with the color science has improved quite a bit. Looking at Eric's images though, he's not struggling at all. The colors in his are magnificent.
I wouldn't pick that at all from Eric's work, and he obviously found a way to work with the color file that works beautifully. And speaking of
I've actually never struggled with the colors, like how they come out of the camera with Sony. I feel like it's like really neutral and like right in the middle. Whereas like when I used to shoot Canon, I feel like it would always come out really red, and like the red channel was always difficult to manage. It would like always clip. I feel like Sony files are super neutral and just like right in the middle and everything. But yeah,
I agree. I mean, it's just 15 years of using the same system. You just influence.
Yeah,
color palette has sort of become unconsciously part of your brain and your mind, just through time, really, I guess. But
can certainly see what you're saying about the reds too. Just even looking through this gallery here with a very kind of nice, soft, subtle reds. They're not overpowering in the images or anything like that. So certainly see how you'd appreciate that.
Well, I'm pretty sure there's some aerial ones in here, Eric. Are they? Am I right?
Yeah, there's some in there.
Yeah, like some of these ones here in the in Colorado. I'm assuming that's aerial anyway.
The Colorado Plateau. Yeah, those are Utah. Yeah, that's an aerial.
Oh, so it's called Colorado Plateau, but it's in Utah.
Yeah, the Colorado Plateau is like a really big geological formation that kind of overlaps Utah, Colorado, some of Arizona, some of New Mexico.
So you did a bit of drone-based work? Or?
Not as much lately. I've had a drone for like the last 4 years, but I was really into it when I first got it, and now I haven't done much just because the experience of flying a drone doesn't get me super excited. Like the perspective is awesome. It's super fun to shoot aerials, but just flying it and stuff, I don't know. It kind of feels like I'm just playing with a toy, a really noisy toy, and I can't really like connect with the landscape as much as I do with my telephoto lens on a tripod.
Have you ever tried hanging out of a chopper or a plane?
I've shot out of a plane like a long time ago, but it wasn't really like a photography thing. It was just kind of like a plane that did like tour flights. And so I took my camera, but they weren't like, circling around to get certain shots, or like, it wasn't photography focused.
Wow, was this Mount William National Park or up the northeast of Tassie? It's amazing. Never seen so many flowering kangaroo tails before like that.
What's that place called? Like, is it Bay of Fire with those orange rocks on the coast? Yeah.
Oh, man, wow. I've never even seen this.
Never seen an image like that from Tassie. Yeah.
So I was there back in 2016, and I did like a 10-day trip with Hillary Younger.
Ah, cool.
And she just basically drove me around, and we were camping like all over the island. We just did like a big loop. And in that place, like we drove by that in the evening to go shoot on the coast for sunset. And I was just like, these plants are insane. Like, those are so sick. So then the next morning when she went back to go shoot the coast, I was like, drop me off at this spot. I'm going to go shoot this. And she was kind of like, what, you want to shoot that like instead of the coast? And I was like, yeah, this is super unique.
It's actually, just to see the number of flowering ones like that. Normally you see them all blackened or sort of the flower heads in the past. But yeah, I'd imagine that it'd be very rare to actually see it like that. So
it's pretty unique even for us, Eric, to be honest. Like 22 years, I've never seen a scene like that. With that kind of volume and accessibility and the stage that the plants are at, it is obviously, as well as a beautiful choice.
It's red, like you will see one flowering and then the rest be sort of blackened off, but to see them all flowering at once, yeah, it's really, really special.
How long? What are your impressions of Tasmania?
I thought it was incredible. I would love to go back to Australia just in general, but yeah, that whole trip was awesome. I was blown away.
Noticed a few Australian scenes here with Cathedral Rocks and 12 Apostles, and that looks like Hammer there too.
No, that one's actually. Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah. Sorry, I was like lagging.
Yeah, and then also Cape Woolamai and Horsehead Rock.
They're not right next to each other, brother. There's some serious road time to get around to all those spots.
Yeah, that's right.
How
beautiful shot there. Look at the flow there at Coles Bay.
I was in Australia for a month, so 10 days of that was Tasmania. The rest was like just driving the Great Ocean Road.
Yeah, you did well for a month, that's for sure. Absolutely.
I started in 12 Apostles and then went up to the Blue Mountains and then back.
And you didn't mind doing a bit of hiking either, by the looks, to get into some of these spots. Yeah.
They're pretty short hikes. We didn't do anything too crazy. The only time we like backpacked at all was in Kosciuszko. Yeah, just up to that like Aries Tour spot.
Yeah, that's right. I'll show you that shot too. I did notice that. It's a beautiful spot, that one. Special spot for me. Amazing for astrophotography there as well. Up in it kind of does stand out actually in this gallery as being such a different scene to a lot of these sort of big craggy peaks, and then all of a sudden you arrive at this granite tour instead. So
that's why I've kept it in there, because it's just it's really different subject matter. I don't think it's the greatest photo, but it's just kind of has a cool I really had fun on that trip, and
it's just so different. It's just amazing. Did you go up there on your own, or did you go with some other Australian photographers?
I was there. I flew out there with a buddy, my friend Casey Keller from the United States, and we just road trip together.
Oh, cool. Well, that sky though, you can't really complain with that. That's pretty nice.
So when I took this photo, I can't remember if it was my camera or my friend's camera, but this morning you can like see the ripples over on the right pool there. It was so windy, like ridiculous. And I think it was my friend. He like turned away from his tripod for a second and it just tipped over into the water, and he couldn't shoot like
in the water.
And then the sunrise was just so colorful and so insane, and he was so bummed.
Oh, so you just had to watch on while you were shooting away, bugger.
Oh, what stage of the trip was it? Like, did he have a camera for the rest of the trip? Or?
Man, this was so long ago. I'm trying to remember it, but it actually might have been my camera the night before this, and then like miraculously it worked the next day, something like that. Someone's camera went in the water, and it was like a stressful morning for one of us. I can't remember who it was, but.
So there's a lot of different places in your gallery. There's Iceland, there's Patagonia, there's Panama, there's New Zealand, there's Australia, there's all around the States. Like, how do you sort of not fund the lifestyle, but how do you sort of manage to get around the world so much, and how do you sort of fund it and keep that going?
Well, most of my international stuff, like if you look at the dates, it's all like pre-2018 or so. Kind of slowed down a bit 2019, and then 2020 obviously kind of stopped completely. I was just super into traveling since like 2014 when I quit my job as a videographer for a marketing company here in Utah, and I just took a year off to travel the world. And that's when I got into nature photography. So I was just going to as many countries as I could. Like in that first year in 2014, I went to 18 different countries. And then I just had the travel bug. And so I just wanted to see, like, you know, kind of check off every place on my bucket list while I'm young and stuff, and had time. And money wise, I had some savings, and I would just do everything like on a super minimal budget. Like, I had decent photography equipment, but I was like backpacking and stuff in like Iceland, wearing like jeans and skateboarding shoes and like cotton sweatshirts. Like, I didn't have like a nice sleeping bag. I didn't even have a sleeping pad for a few years, and I would just sleep on the ground, like just soaking wet, never dry. And I just kind of made it happen with what I had.
Oh, I love it. Oh, can we look at that one with the I think it's the next one. Second top left. Like that looks like you're just about getting blasted.
Oh yeah, that must have been windy.
To Antarctica in this photograph. Tell us about what it was like photographing this.
Well, on that day, it was just like we were just hiking around, and I think it was like completely socked in, and then the wind started picking up. And so we hiked back down to the lake, and by the time we got back down to the lake, there was just like, I don't know, the winds were probably like 90K, just insane. Like you couldn't even stand up. And so I was like, I'm going to try to shoot this because this is nuts. But there was just water just spraying everywhere. And so I got kind of behind a boulder where the wind wasn't knocking me over anymore. I could have my tripod set up like as low as it goes, and figured out like this foreground and stuff. And then I would just shoot like a bunch of frames as these waves were coming in, and then clean off my lens because it would just get soaked, and then shoot a bunch more. And I really didn't think like any kind of a usable photo was going to come out of it. But yeah.
You proved that wrong.
It's one of my favorites. The energy and the dynamism and just knowing what it probably took to get that photograph is just screaming at me out of this one. And how much of your work is tripod based and how much is handheld?
I'd say nowadays probably 90% is tripod.
Interesting.
I like to shoot a lot of stuff in soft light, so like in the twilight or in the shade, or not super bright settings for the most part. And so I tend to be doing longer exposures, especially since I use telephoto. I'm like always shooting at f/16, f/22. So I'm not letting in a lot of light. So I need to do like longer exposures most of the time. And when you're shooting super tight, handheld can be difficult as well because any little movement is going to mess it up.
And also, I guess you got focus stacking and things like that as well, which is hard to do handheld.
I don't focus stack much, actually.
Oh, right. So even like a shot like this, or you would probably maybe 2 frames or something like that, maybe?
That one wasn't focus stacked. That was just like f/16, and I just didn't get too close to the flowers. It was like just enough. I don't like that look where you have like a huge foreground, because I feel like it's really dominating, and it's like hard to focus on your subject that's in the background when the foreground is like blown up even bigger than the subject. So to me, like visually, that doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
So I never really get super close, like with my wide angle.
Interesting.
Where I would need to focus stack. And then telephoto stuff, it's usually all like on a single plane or like a f/22. I can get it all sharp.
This one's
I'm also lazy, so.
Well, I was going to ask you, like one characteristic technically I've noticed through this whole gallery is the crispness edge to edge and foreground to background is really consistent. And it's sort of like I don't know how much of that is the way you treat it in post, and obviously it has to be a technical element of how you shoot. So I was quite curious about that, whether there was focus stacking or whether it was just really small apertures, or really curated kind of handling of sharpening. Like, but is a really consistent aspect to your images, Eric, from what I can see. Like how much of that is, just in camera? I'm assuming most of it probably.
For like the sharpness, that would just be like focal lengths. Like the only sharpening I do is like for all of these files, I just have a web sharpener that I do to export the file.
And do you what was I going to say? You do a lot of manual focusing or sort of rely on the autofocus as well?
I haven't used autofocus in like the last 10 years.
Wow.
And I think a lot of that comes from my video background, because like now they have autofocus for video and like focus tracking. But back when I was doing videography, you always had to be shifting it and doing it all manually. So I learned to be like really quick with focus, and like I can just do it like without having to think too much. So I also just don't want to trust my camera. Like I want to know for sure it's in focus. I don't want to just think my camera's doing a good job and then come home and realize it buggered it up.
Well, you do have also, if you're going through the Metabones and the A7R2, I'd be also manually focusing with that setup as well.
I wouldn't be relying on that setup either.
Yeah, people always hate on the autofocus, but I wouldn't even know what to say because I've never used it. So it doesn't make a difference.
Question, what do you feel like there's any influence from your video background that has come through?
That's a good question. I feel like I still do a little bit of video from time to time. And I feel like my photography, like now that I am so into photography now, instead of video, that has influenced my video a lot. Like my compositions are a lot more precise and deliberate in video. Like I focus more on the subject and like placement and balance, and also lighting and things that I wouldn't recognize as much before. But I haven't seen how videography, besides like just operating a camera and stuff, has influenced my photography. I mean, I think it just gave me a head start with like operating equipment and stuff like that, and being quick with settings and all that, but not necessarily like the artisticness. Yeah.
So you've got a we'll get to that a little bit later, but you seem to find these amazing pockets of oily sort of material. Is it mainly sort of organic kind of rotting matter that creates those sort of oils, or is it certain sort of substrate in the soil, or what is it that this comes through in a lot of your images actually?
Yeah, so I've found those oils in lots of different ecosystems and environments, but for the most part, I find them in the canyons in southern Utah. And the main reason they're so abundant down there is because in these canyons, it's very dark. What's that?
I was just saying, look, see if you can find one of those.
There's one right there. That one's from the mountains.
That was like reflection, is it?
Yeah, that was like next to a lake. Yeah, that one's just water. That's like on a river.
These are more of them here, isn't it?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, that's it.
A really good knack for the angle of light that you're shooting a lot of these from. The way you introduce water into your images is very it's very noted, I guess. Like that you just you move around or get to the angle where that reflected component of the water surface is a really big part of your images.
Well, for me, like it's not about photographing the water, it's about photographing the light. The water is just kind of like the it's kind of like toast and like putting butter and like jam on it. It's like it's not really about the bread, it's about the stuff you put on it. And so like the water is kind of just like the thing that holds the light or that gathers the light, and I'm just really interested in the light, and that the water is just kind of like the vehicle for it.
I like that.
So
you that as a quote. Eric said it's all about the jam, not the toast. I love it. Oh, I'm gonna use that. Do you have a format that you like to shoot in, like some are square, some are 3:2? Like, do you just keep it pretty fluid? This is kind of a bit more like 4:5 looking. Like, do you mix up those formats relative to the image, or you just have a time or an influence that where you just spend a period of time shooting certain formats?
It all comes down to the subject matter and the composition. So I always let that dictate. I never try to like force things into a certain ratio while I'm shooting. And also like a frustrating thing is like with Sony cameras, all you have is 3:2 or 16:9, which is super annoying. Like they should just come up with a firmware update where you can do like 1:1, 4:3, 4:5. It'd be super easy for them, but I can't do in-camera crops. So a lot of times I'm just shooting a scene and I'll know like, okay, I'm going to crop out this much later on. That'll probably be a 4:5, or, I'm going to crop out like half of it. That'll probably be a 1:1. I'll kind of just eye it. But a lot of times it just comes down to like when I'm processing the image and I'm fine tuning the composition by cropping in a little bit or changing the ratio. When I decide that, it's not really like, I don't really have a preference. I think 4:5s are really nice for verticals, because like 2:3s now, they just feel really skinny to me.
You're getting pretty stretched. Yeah.
And do you sort of have a list of crops that you don't add more, so that you got all of these different crops that you're having to play with?
Yeah, so I'll usually stick to 3:2, 16:9, 4:5, 4:3, 5:7, 1:1. All the traditional sizes.
Yeah.
So I'll see which one of those fits the best, like with what I need to crop out.
There's another aspect to your imagery, the way you present it here, is every single image is named. And a lot of images there, and somehow or other you've created quite a beautiful parallel with the words and the images that I don't think many people could do across such a wide range and diverse material. And I'm interested in your, where that sort of comes from, and also why you do that in the first place. Because to me, sometimes, because a lot of my work personally is really abstract, and you can really influence somebody's interpretation of an image by word, or potentially even limit them, or push them in a certain direction away from where they could go otherwise. And conversely, you can bring them deeper into an image as well and take them somewhere they wouldn't have got to otherwise. So what's your relationship with naming your images, and how do you do it so damn well?
Yeah, it's funny because I actually get asked that question a lot. And the funny thing about it is, like, my process for naming images is kind of just while I'm editing the scene, a word or something will come to my mind that the image reminds me of, and I'll just put it there. Like, I'm not racking my brain like, oh, what's the perfect name for this, or looking up words online or something like that. Like, a word will just pop into my head. Like, I never have trouble coming up with a name. But like you said, the reason I name all my work, besides just the practicalness of it, because if you're like, oh, Eric, I love that one image where you have that leaf and that oil and this, it's like, well, I don't know which one that is. Like, but if it has a name, you can just tell me the specific name and I know exactly what you're talking about. But also, like you said, the name can influence people. So it's like, it's an extra thing you have to kind of drive the viewer into the direction that you want with the scene and influence the way they feel about it and see it. So I think if you use a name that,
like this one's levitation, so you can sort of see what you're trying to achieve in terms of presenting the image as well, which is really cool.
Yeah, with that dark backdrop in this one, I felt like they were just suspended, like nothing was underneath them. So yeah, by saying that, it kind of makes you think about that if you don't see that already.
Definitely does. Like, there's no doubt about it. Yeah.
There's one image in this folio called ultraviolence, is it? And I was just...
that was in the forest one that we were in.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
It might have been intimates.
Oh, okay.
Oh, we're on leaves now. Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of a orangey black.
Yeah, it's in the intimates one.
Forest scene. It's quite dark. I think it's on the right-hand side of the feed, sort of half or partway down. But that was one of the names that really stuck out to me, because I was just there was a sense of discord about that name for me rather than congruence, and I wasn't quite sure where to go with that name. So I was really curious to ask you about the way you've titled it this way.
Well, for me, it's like there's super intense light in it, so like ultraviolet light. But then I changed it to ultraviolet because the light is like extremely harsh, and you got these black shadows and these really harsh highlights. So it's like kind of like a violent light. Like, it's not a soft, like peaceful light. It's like very harsh and a bit more dramatic.
It's like almost reaching down, stabbing, or like a
I didn't really want this one to have like a peaceful feeling. I felt like it's kind of dark and kind of eerie, and it's sometimes the forest is very inviting and calming, and sometimes it's really creepy and you want to run out of there. So
and I do enjoy the creativity. I do enjoy the creativity in terms of those titles. I did see the other one was Kaleidoscape rather than Kaleidoscope as well. So you're sort of also doing a bit of play on words as well, which is also very creative.
Yeah, I mean, for that ultraviolence one, I mean, to me, I was actually personally moving towards a very soft and delicate kind of aesthetic for the way it was influencing me. So that's why it was so jarring when you use that word. So it really did influence and take me away from where I was going, for instance.
Yeah, and that's a good point. But like, as a photographer, the only thing that I know for sure is the way I see stuff and the way the scene affects me. And so if I'm trying to guess like how other people are going to interpret it, I'm not being very deliberate as the creator in like what I want to show. So like, adding the name that fits the scene the way that I see it, I feel like that adds like another level of deliberateness to what I'm trying to show. People might see whatever they see, but that's not necessarily what I want them to see.
And that's what I found so intriguing about it, because it's yeah, it was more insightful of you and where you're at as an artist, and I wouldn't have access to that interpretation without the name. So I feel like the naming is bringing a lot more of you into your work, and giving you a lot more insight into and the intentionality behind the images, as well as maybe even the narrative that I may or may not be seeing through my own eyes. So it's funny how you can, yeah, like there's different ways you can influence people with your work, and it's not everyone that would, you know, have the capacity to do it so well with their naming. Like I remember with my group, the Light Collective, Eric, I don't know if you know, these guys are some pretty cool fellas in Australia, and we do some great work together. And Luke's actually jumped on board for the latest project, and we had these big arguments about whether we named the images at all. And we've already spoken about some of the reasons why. And one of the reasons why is because the naming aesthetic for the different artists was like, oh my God, like Iggy called one of them Golden Sperm or something. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not publishing that in the book, Iggy. And I was like, and it was his idea to name the images. And I'm like, oh man. And so when you had a bunch of artists together collectively trying to produce a body of work that is meant to sit with congruence with each other, and they're all naming them differerly, it was tugging and pulling things in sort of different directions and influencing its ability to some extent to sit together. So I've sort of had that experience the other way, where it can sort of pull a body of work apart as much as it can bring it together. I guess that's why I'm so present to it. But yeah, I have to say it's one of the things I really admire about what you've done here, to do this with such a large body of work, and even imagery, you know, as you've got here, like an entire collection just on leaves, and there's a huge array of interpretation, and both through the word and visuals, and a body of work, which is really, I think, really hard to do. And I don't know anyone that has an entire gallery of like just leaves.
These there's the aspen leaves, aren't they? Those ones, or the rounded, more round ones.
Yeah, and then the ones that look similar, but they have kind of like serrated edges, are cottonwood leaves.
I thought that might be the case. And then you've got more like maples, I think.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, like maple leaves, oak leaves, box elder leaves.
What are those ones there?
Those are like oak leaves, and mostly oak leaves and a few maple leaves.
Is that native to the US, the oaks?
Yeah, they're all over.
Yeah.
Same with maples.
So why the fascination with leaves personally?
My favorite season to do photography and to be outside in general is in the fall. So that's just a subject matter that I'm around a lot. And instead of just always looking at the trees, I'm always looking, like, regardless of the time of year, I'm always looking at the ground. I'm always looking above me. I'm always looking in every direction. And so I just always notice these like really cool patterns and colors and shapes and things with leaves and the different ways they fall and the different kinds of textures they fall on top of. Like, they always have different backdrops, and I just really connect with them. I think they're super cool. Like, every single leaf looks different to me. They all have lots of character based on color, shape, size, design. A lot of them, like that one, they have little patterns in them, like spots, and there's just so much variety, and I'm always seeing new ones that I've never seen before. And so it's just my portfolio became like really
This one blows me away.
That one's
leaves literally disintegrated and melted into the organic material. Is that what's happened? Or?
Yeah, that one's insane. I've never seen that phenomenon again. Basically the leaves disappeared, but the oil, like, since it was colder and it kept freezing, it just retained its shape like perfectly. And so just shooting like the ghosts that were left is.
I was like,
cool.
How
that one's nuts.
Heck did you find that?
Yeah, and there's nothing I could have done, right? I couldn't place the leaves. Like, I can't place those outlines in that one. And the way that they're just like yin and yang like that, like just that perfect position was just an insane scene to find.
Like, almost like electricity going through between them or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, the technical aspect too is that even with your intimate scenes at an angle, they're really crisp corner to corner. So it's kind of like, that's what I was wondering about the focus stacking versus smaller aperture thing, because it's quite distinctive whether you've got a grand scene with a huge depth of perspective or whether you've got an intimate scene at a tight angle. They're really crisp to the edges.
Yeah, I just always double check. I'll just review the image, and if it's really soft on the edges, I'll focus stack it maybe. But usually I'm just trying to shoot it at f/22 in one exposure.
Get too worried about just diffraction and all of that at f/22?
With my telephoto lens, I never really notice any kind of diffraction that is bad enough that, I feel like I got to do something else.
Okay.
It always works.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. For me, it's all about the subject matter, like the technical stuff. Something can be really sharp and like technically flawless, but if it's not engaging and not compelling subject matter, that it's not.
I personally don't spend much time worrying about sharpness at all, and I've hardly focus stack anything. But it's me. I'm in the moment. Right. What's there, and I'm not really.
I'd rather capture the best moment of light or something like that rather than get it perfectly sharp from corner to corner. Like if it's good enough, but I can capture like the best subject matter and content, that's the most important thing to me.
Yeah, I might do both because it's very consistent. The caliber.
But if you're using a tripod too, that's obviously going to help a lot, being able to stop down and really take it slow and be very, very considered in where you're framing and that kind of thing too.
So I'd say there's probably a more consistent quality of light and your Leaf series in particular, and I guess that's it's the kind of subject matter you probably need to shoot in more diffuse light, I guess, or shadowed kind of light. Is that something you're deliberately sort of looking for? Do you sort of wait till the weather shifts or go out in a certain season to try and get that kind of quality of light? Or
they just never really look good to me when there's like direct sunlight or anything that overcomplicates the scene. I feel like they look so good simplified, just with very even light, where the light actually becomes a distraction if there's too much obvious light like interplaying. So I'd rather have the light be even and focus more on the colors and the lines and the shapes, because the lighting isn't very necessary. You already have great color separation just from the actual color of the scene. You don't need like highlights and shadows to give you that separation.
Do you have an ethos around leave nature as it is, as opposed
to I was gonna
placing things?
Going to ask the same thing. I mean, I don't know. I guess there's a level of temptation that would always be there in terms of it is a movable object after all. It's not really making a huge impact on how the place works, but obviously you're not seeing the place as it is if you are doing that. And do you have a view on that? And I guess it's a bit of a controversial area in landscape photography.
I don't have a view in it in general. Like I don't think any certain way about it in general, like if people do it or not. In my own photography, I tend to see things that are already there and I recognize them, as opposed to like having an idea in my head and then trying to create it. So I never really see like an opportunity like, oh, this would look great if it had a leaf on it or something like that. Cause I just see the scenes that are already there, things that grab my eye. I'm not much of a planner or anything like that. So just the way that I approach photography, that wouldn't really be applicable. But like sometimes if you're shooting a leaf carpet or something and there's like maybe a small gap where there's some dirt or grass sticking up, I'll grab a leaf and place it there just because the composition is not going to work without it.
And you can't if you wanted to enter a competition, like a nature competition, it's also then
can't clone it out.
You can't really clone it or anything. So it's almost, in some ways, it's encouraging you to tidy up the scene as it was photographed. So there's still there's an interesting balance there. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the oil stuff or ice stuff, you can't place the leaves because the leaves like are frozen into the ice. Or the oil will just get broken if you touch it. So you got to find the leaves that are already in it. Yeah, it'll ruin it if you put one down there. But yeah, my portfolio, just because I love this subject matter, it just became like heavily dominated by leaf images. So I just had to create their own section since there are so many of them.
Fantastic.
Wasn't like a plan that I had with any kind of foresight, like, oh, I'm going to go shoot a ton of leaf images and have a leaf gallery on my website because that would be cool and different. Like it just formed itself over the years.
Yeah, and I mean the quality of them definitely, definitely deserves that. So and you got to play to your strengths. If that's something you're good at, you might as well show the world about it.
Absolutely. So Eric, I know you make a point of releasing your work and bodies of work more than individual shots, which you can't sort of avoid on Instagram, obviously. But what's your sort of process around that? Like, how do you, why do you do that as opposed to sort of give yourself the freedom to just go anywhere? Do you feel like there's more intentionality and purpose when you release sort of bodies of work together as opposed to otherwise? Or
yeah, I have a lot of different reasons. Like I've always loved albums. In skateboarding, you don't release a trick by itself. You release like a part where you have like a bunch of tricks that you filmed over the last couple of years. And I used to film skateboarding for a living when I was a teenager. And I also still skateboard myself to this day. And so that's heavily influenced the way I approach things. Like just like
I wouldn't have picked that. Skateboarding influenced my image release approach.
Yeah, skateboarding has influenced my approach to photography in a lot of different ways. But
tell us about that.
Well, like in the skateboarding community, when you're skateboarding, you're putting your body on the line. Like you can get really hurt, and a lot of times you do get hurt. That's just a part of skateboarding. Like whenever I'm skateboarding a lot, I always have like injuries. I got cut up elbows and stuff. Like right now, I can't skateboard, and it's been a few months because I like tore a muscle in my hip flexor. And luckily, I've still been able to hike and stuff, but I've been too hurt to skate. But so like in the skateboarding community, if somebody goes to a place and does something super awesome and everybody's freaking out, it makes no sense to go and do the exact same thing and copy them. Because like, why are you going to go and get hurt, risk going to the hospital or whatever for something that somebody already did and nobody's going to like applaud you for it? And, you may as well do something new if you're going to go to the trouble. So like with photography, I've never seen it. It's never made sense to me to like go to a place and take the exact same photo as somebody else, just because all my life with skateboarding, you just never did that. That's a super weird concept. So like copying someone's photo intentionally or something like that, I think that's a super weird thing. I get how like people do it in order to learn, like when they're starting out. Maybe you want to, maybe you don't have a lot of ideas and you just want to practice like on technical stuff. So you're just kind of shooting stuff that people have already thought of and then practicing. But I think it's weird how people copy other photographers and they try to receive recognition out of it as if they did something, but it's like somebody else already thought of everything for you. You didn't have to do any work. And also kind of like, not really like an aggression, but I have like an edge with like hiking and stuff. And I mean, as a skateboarder, you learn to endure a lot of pain. So I have a pretty high pain threshold. So like I can go without eating for a long time. Like I do 3-day fasts pretty regularly, and I only eat once a day just because I kind of have like a high tolerance for being uncomfortable. I think a lot of that comes from skating.
I was going to say, sleeping without a mat for years.
Yeah, like I'm just not scared to like get hurt. If I do get hurt, I can keep going. Like I can hike a few more days on a bum ankle or something. Like it just kind of gives me an edge, and I always want to push myself physically. Like I like to reach my physical limits and go past them so that I can like realize what I'm actually capable of instead of just what I thought I was capable of. I love proving myself wrong.
I think I've shot that exact place. Is it called Spooky something or other?
Peekaboo, right next to Spooky.
Oh yeah. I was just thinking, yeah. Wait a minute. I was just like, what a fluke! I got almost the exact same photograph. I was like, what?
That's crazy.
Like GSENM.
Oh yeah, this one is Spooky. Sorry, it was on the last one still.
Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. Now there's a mouthful. But if somebody's wondering on the bottom of that what GSNM is, that's right, isn't it, Eric?
Yeah. Yeah, Escalante.
Yeah, so it's in the kind of what, northern Utah?
Southern Utah.
Southern. I get it mixed up. because I've been through.
Yeah, all the desert stuff is southern Utah.
So, oh, sorry, yeah, thinking because I never made it as far as Salt Lake or anything like that. Where are you in Utah, Eric?
I'm like an hour south of Salt Lake.
Okay, so you've
in the suburbs.
Of a lot of these things, then, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very, very lucky to have so much amazing landscapes. Just so I guess these only be within a few hours drive. A lot of these scenes we're seeing.
Yeah, and that's why I live here. I'm from Southern California, but I moved here 9 years ago because I just want to be in this kind of landscape. Not just as a photographer, but I just enjoy being able to go hike and do stuff whenever I want, being close to really cool nature.
And is it Colorado's just the next state south? Is that right?
To the east.
Oh, to the east.
Okay. Yeah, kind of southeast.
It's kind of like the Four Corners: New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and what's the other one? Like the Four Corners, the four states. So that intersection of those states, I feel, is some of the greatest landscape areas on the planet.
Yeah, Arizona is the fourth one.
Arizona, that's right. Yeah, and yeah, I've had a bit of time out there, Eric. I'm actually American. My mother's from Memphis, Tennessee.
Oh wow!
And I've lived in San Fran for a few years on and off, and California, different parts, mainly Northern California. But I've done a few trips across the Bible Belt, across the southern part of America, which was pretty fascinating. Lots of trips to California. I've done the Grand Canyon in winter, 23 days rafting, and went through Zion, done mountain biking in Moab, and been around Yellowstone. I got friends in the Tetons up there, so I've fallen in love with this landscape, and I actually have a really special body of work from Death Valley as well that I've been shooting from the air there for about 5 or 6 years now, and it's not like it hasn't been done, but it's actually quite a hard place to shoot from the air because it's really full of military exclusion zones and terrible thermals and hardly any kind of planes that actually have high wings that you shoot out of. They're mainly those low wing Cherokees, and so I've sort of been sitting on that body work for a while. I haven't really released it yet because I wanted to do that. Not necessarily inspired by you, but with that same purpose. You know, here's a very considered body of work taken over a long period of time with a lot of intentionality. And that's something that I feel about with that Death Valley sort of area in particular. It's funny how these characteristics mix through. Like that one before I thought was Death Valley, but I can tell that one is. Just in terms of the way nature is sculpted, I guess, in these places, it's like, I guess you can't really say you got a favorite, but where's an area maybe that you haven't spent much time yet that you want to, that's in the States?
I've never been up. Well, I've been to Alaska, but I've never gone like backpacking in Alaska, like in the Yukon and stuff, and like northern Alaska, and a lot of that stuff that Mark Adamus does. Like, I would love to go do that sometime.
Yeah, I've been looking at his work and I'm just like, oh my god, like it sits alone in its way because I don't think anybody's explored that particular landscape with his level of refinement.
At least not photographers, like climbers and stuff and backpackers for sure. But in terms of landscape photographers,
purely from a photographic point of view, like his, and those places, you don't just plonk yourself there. There's real commitment and risk to getting some of these places and spending time out there in the seasons that he's out there as well. Like there's some people that only go Alaska in a 1 month window and they won't touch it otherwise. And there's others that have mountaineering skill sets and don't mind putting, their physicality at risk, to get out there. Sounds like you're one of those types.
Yeah, I just I haven't gone up there yet because there's places like near my home that I'm just infatuated with at the moment, and I just can't stop thinking about them. And every year I just go and explore new areas and stuff. And so I'm and also I just had a son this year. He's 9 months old now, and so I've been trying to like do shorter trips with the places that I have nearby and take advantage of that, as opposed to
made that more of a thing too, wouldn't it? Like, I don't know if you had the restrictions we had, but quite often we couldn't leave our own state anyway.
Well, yeah, there was like a good 6 months where it was hard to photograph anything around here because a lot of national parks were closed completely. A lot of counties weren't allowing anybody to stay overnight from outside of the county. So it was pretty difficult anyways, but yeah, that's also part of it. Just, I don't want to deal with international travel right now.
And seeing some of these Utah scenes, I mean, you know, I can totally understand why you would say that there's no need to go too far from home. There's more than enough. Like something like this is just an incredible landscape. Seeing a place like that, you know, I would be the same. Like, why would you need to go too far? And I certainly identify with what you're saying in terms of living in Tasmania. And, you know, I sort of feel like there's not a huge amount of reason to go too far if you've got so much around you. Just, you know, and then you can become more of a specialist or have a really meaningful body of work from the place you live in. Also, if you've got connections or contacts, you know, selling prints, often people want to buy a print from where you're based. So there's a lot of benefits to sticking local, I think, anyway, aside from the family thing, as you mentioned. So very interesting.
Yeah, Tasmania is sick. There's a lot of exploration down there that you can do, and also shout out to Peter Dombrowski and Robert Blakers. Those guys are awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Rob's
big heroes of ours.
Almost my next door neighbor.
He's got some awesome stuff. He has that one photo of like eucalyptus trees with like really low angled light,
playing snow gums. Yes.
Oh, it's sitting in my bedroom, man.
That shot is just like so juicy.
Yeah. It's a Tassie classic.
If you haven't looked at Chris Bell's work, do you come across him?
I don't think I've looked at his work now.
All right. Well, do yourself a favor, because he has probably a little bit more of a style similar to your own, to be honest, in terms of the way he interprets the Tasmanian landscapes. He's a master at really subdued lighting and more intimate scenes, maybe on a different level and a different aesthetic than Rob. And he's of the same sort of ilk and genre. You know, he'll do 3-week solo trips sort of all the time, and he's in his 60s and he's still doing that. And yeah, I think he'd really enjoy his work. He's got some beautiful books out as well, actually. Maybe even more than Rob does. We're kind of lucky. Like I live in this kind of zone on the mountain in Kanani that has, with Dombrowski's live just up the road. Peter lives just around the corner. Chris lives just up the road. Grant Dixon lives on the other side of me. This sort of this kind of pocket of people, I guess. And I guess, I don't know, do you sit in a pocket of people like that where you are, or you a bit out on your own, or there's a big community around you that you engage with? Do you mainly do solo sort of work? How do you engage culturally, I guess, or community wise with your photography?
I mainly do solo trips, mostly because either A, people can't take the time to go as long as I want to go for a lot of times, or B, they're not willing to do the hiking and stuff. There are a few photographers here in Utah. I don't really shoot with any of them though. Like Guy Tall lives in southern Utah, but he's also a lone wolf, so I've never gone out and shot with him, even though we correspond a little bit with emails and stuff. But
have you met up before? If he's such a idol of yours, it must be an amazing opportunity.
So we've been trying to meet up so I can give him a copy of my book, like in person. Because I'm always in his neck of the woods in southern Utah, but we just haven't been able to link up. Like when I'm around his town, he's out shooting, and then when he's back, I'm not shooting. And so we probably will soon next time I'm down there. But
that would be a special moment when it does. That would be amazing for you.
Yeah, he's an amazing artist, like in every way.
Yeah, you don't have any shortage of giant shoulders to stand on. So
it's always an incredible experience when you meet someone that you've always been inspired by, and actually get to have a bit of a dialogue and realize that they're just a normal person just like you as well. It's always good.
Eric, you've probably been asked about this quite a few times, but it's close to my heart. I do a lot of work in conservation and a lot of motivation and purpose behind some of my trips and projects is conservation based. And do you want to speak a little bit to sort of our audience in this part of the world about what role that's had for you?
Well, like I said before, my main interest is just nature in general and spending time in nature and being in the wilderness as much as possible. And photography is just kind of something I do while I'm there. And photography has helped me connect with nature on a deeper level because it's made me see things more creatively. It makes me observe things closer and pay more attention and notice things that I wouldn't notice if I didn't have a camera. And, if I didn't have that kind of photographer mindset. And so for me, the whole point behind like sharing my photography, bothering with social media and stuff like that is to hopefully share the value that these places have with people that maybe have never been to them in person and that maybe never will get the same opportunity that I've had to spend this much time in them and see all these different sides of them and see them in different lighting. And, I have this broader perspective of these places than most people can attain in their lifetime. So I just want people to understand why they're so important and how they really are the best in their pure and unspoiled state, and that if we can just keep them intact, that's the best thing we can do in terms of preserving them. So that's like my real whole motivation with photography, just trying to share how valuable these places are with the rest of the world. There's really no other motivation besides that. Like, I sell tutorial videos, I make a living off photography, but that's really just so I can focus on this mission that I have with all of my time. And I don't need to, go work at a restaurant or something in between. And, I'm not expending energy on this other part-time job or something to make ends meet. I'm really grateful that I can focus full time on photography and have been able to for the last 7 or 8 years. That way I can really immerse myself and I can create the best images possible, because I feel like the message that I have with them is so important.
And you talked about, making a living and all of that is another sort of interesting one. But have you ever thought about NFTs or have a view on the NFT space? It's always an interesting one to talk about.
Yeah, nobody's actually really asked me about that in an interview yet. So I have not minted any NFTs at the moment. And right now I've chosen not to. And I don't judge other people that do it. I feel fortunate that I'm in a financial position where I don't have to do things if I don't want to. I know other people might not be in that same position, so they feel a bit more pressure to do things that might go against their values or aren't the best for the environment, which we all love so much as photographers since we all admire the environment. So for the moment, I've chosen not to sell them just because I'm not comfortable with it. But I do think the future of displaying work and with photography is going to shift from printmaking to NFTs and more digital stuff with virtual reality coming. Like, there's going to be virtual exhibitions, galleries, things like that, which I think would be really cool. And I'm definitely looking forward to doing those kinds of things in the future. And I think it's going to open up a lot of great ways to share my message with a broader audience and reach people across the world in a better way, create better experiences for them that'll be more impactful. But, I'm waiting until NFTs have a smaller footprint on the environment. And basically, once they have a smaller footprint on the environment than making a print, that's when I would feel comfortable doing it. But for the moment, since that's not the case, I've chosen to wait.
Do you think part of it's also that it seems to, my estimate, or my view on it seems to be there's a lot of shilling going on in terms of people really kind of, and they call it being bullish or whatever, and just really going hard at, flogging their wares, and it doesn't seem very seems very egotistical in a way, or being very salesish, which is sort of goes against the flow of a nature photographer in some ways. Whereas if it becomes a little bit more mainstream, I'd imagine that'll all simmer down and don't have to be quite so brash with how you approach things. Is that a thought process there?
That's exactly right. And to me, it seems really out of character with the way like an artist photographer is. And so for me, it's kind of been shocking to see certain people that I've known for a long time take that route and totally change and like act like a different person. And I'm just not interested in participating in any kind of a market that your success isn't dependent on the quality of your work. Rather, it's dependent on your ability to advertise and market yourself and, push your stuff out there constantly. I don't want to engage in any kind of marketplace or any kind of, business opportunity that's like that. I want my work to be purchased by people that value it for what it is, and let it speak for itself. So since I do see it as something that's going to stick around, and I don't think it's just a flash in the pan. I don't feel any kind of urgency to rush in and be one of the first people, because I think long down the road, your success isn't going to be dependent on whether you did it 6 months before everybody else, 10 years from now. So I feel like there's no rush to start doing it. I know eventually I probably will, since that's the way that things are going. But again, I'm just waiting until I feel more comfortable about it. But, and also further down the road, like you said, people aren't going to be purchasing NFTs just because they're NFTs or because of anything else other than, they think it's a great piece of artwork.
And I think that, people are flogging them off so early now, are they really even selling them for their true value? It's hard to say. I think they're just more of almost like a gold rush kind of scenario where everyone's trying to jump on and it's hard to really know what anything's worth when see some of the numbers people are flying around with certain images and you're kind of like, oh, that doesn't really look like it's worth that much. And then other images look amazing and the values don't seem to, it's more just about what you feel like you want to put a price on and how well you can market it to the collectors. And so, yeah, it's an interesting, I think it's definitely worth watching as you're saying. Like, I think it would be, I wouldn't say foolish, but it's definitely something to look into, because future things like that, you want to be at least sort of riding on the wave rather than sort of being a few waves behind. But I have a very similar viewpoint with it myself.
Yeah. I mean, it's just people have been selling prints for the last 150 years or whatever. So that doesn't mean that if you start selling prints today, you've missed the boat, right? If you have great work, you can be just as successful as anybody else was 10, 20 years ago. I believe that's kind of my philosophy. Let the work speak for itself. That should determine the value, not your ability to market it or advertise. So I think a lot of stuff right now is very overvalued in the NFT space, which is why a lot of people are jumping on, because maybe they can get away with selling something that's not very good for a higher price than they would be able to as a print or in a different marketplace where things have a more established value. So yeah, that value could go down, which it most likely will, because I think it is overvalued, or it could go up, like you're saying. So you might be selling yourself short right now with one of ones and stuff, which further down the road, there might be a lot more.
And if it's your whole portfolio that's sold, well, then you might have got a good amount of money, but who knows what it could have been. I guess there's always a risk that it could go the other way, and that's why you want to jump on now. I know that you do seem to see the anxiety or that kind of seagulls kind of trying to get a chip or something like that. So it's just, I don't find it very attractive. We go on Twitter and see the whole feed there. It's kind of, a little sickening sometimes, perhaps. But yeah.
And skateboarding is back to that, the skateboarding community it's very ruthless. If you sell out at all, or it looks like you're skating for any other reason than you just want to skate, you're going to be exiled from the community. Everybody's going to think you're so lame. So I kind of carry that with me as well. I really would never want to sell out as a photographer. I'm really hard on myself in that aspect, because I would just feel sick if I did that. That's just really ingrained in me. You can't sell out. You can't sell out. Once you sell out, it's over. You've sold your soul and you're done. So
you've broken it. You've
broken
the seal.
Exactly. There's no going back after that. So I'm just really careful with any kind of business opportunities or things that I do, or the way that I come off. Not that I'm trying to act differently than I am. It's just, I always try my best. It's always just really important to me first to stay true to my values rather than make money by sacrificing them at all.
It's about integrity, isn't it? And about having your values and sticking to those values, and not letting what's happening outside externally to that influence and change what you really want to achieve. So,
and that doesn't mean that anybody that sells NFTs doesn't have integrity. It just means they have different values than I do. So I don't judge them either.
No, that's right. That's it. Oh, cool. No,
I really appreciated your both you guys your thoughtfulness around that issue, because it's I found it too. I found it I guess there's an intangibility to it that feels a bit unreal. So as an art form, I guess, and there's a very skewed, bizarre kind of energy around the valuing of them, and there's also, how would I describe? I guess this sort of gold rush mentality at the moment, because a few people have just all of a sudden made large amounts of, I don't even know if you call it money really, crypto commerce, but
it's money. You can cash it in.
But enough to influence their art and their craft by getting a large amount of money in a short space of time, and all of a sudden might give them the freedom and opportunity to shoot a lot more that they wouldn't have otherwise. And I guess there's a sense of urgency about getting in early before the market gets completely flooded and it diffuses it all out and devalues, because
but I think the good work always stands out.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. If that's the rationale, then it's sort of suggesting that you don't think your work has value, and you have to jump in there and try and create that value.
Yeah, and you should just delete your Instagram account right now, because there's billions of people on Instagram. Like, what chance do you have? But it's not like that. I feel like the good work always rises to the top. So I've always just, for me, the most important thing in terms of like my financial success or whatever, if there's anything that I try to do in order to be successful as a full-time photographer, is produce the absolute best photography that I can. I feel like if you do that,
doing a very good job at that.
Everything else will just fall into place. That's kind of like a certain amount of faith that I have in that kind of idea.
Yeah, I agree with you, Eric, but it's also, there's a dissonance in values often between artists and commerce, and it's existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years, because there's that many photographers I know that are some of the most talented in the world, but there's no way in hell I'd ever be able to make a living out of it, because they're not business people at all. And I probably fall in that category to a fair extent myself, and I just managed to get by, and I'm fine with that. But there's a lot of more financially successful photographers that are enabled to keep in their craft because they're good at those aspects of things that other people that probably have far more impactful and purposeful and intentional work that's going to last the test of time, that just can't do that. They need to work in order to be able to keep doing the craft. So I think in a perfect world, I'm with you, but if you don't have a savviness around the commercial world, and you don't have a sugar daddy or a sugar mama or a side job, it's not that easy if you don't have a business mind as well.
Yeah, I definitely don't have any kind of savviness or business mind, but I got a wife, I got 3 kids that I support, and luckily we've always been taken care of. And I feel like, my whole focus has just been on the work. Just never let the quality of the work go down. Always keep that as high as possible. And everything else will fall into place. Mm-hmm. Maybe one day that'll stop working, but I feel like I've had a good ride, and, it's worked really well, and it's only gotten better.
If that stops working, then I think I'd hang up my camera too. I mean, it's, the problem, that people need to still be able to appreciate a good image at the end of the day.
Yeah, because if they're not, then what's the point of sharing it anyways?
What's the point?
Just keep it to yourself.
I mean, I mean, that's right. Yeah, it's not like there's no point. You'd still do it for yourself gladly, but in terms of sharing work, and I guess that's one of the concerns with even that NFT space, is that it's not about good work as much as the sales, but that not always going to be that way. And that's been a really interesting part of the conversation. One thing I was looking to do too is your more recent work, and I guess that's going to be that your latest releases here, very sort of autumnal scenes, I suppose, coming through. Is this all sort of, it looks like it's all, like you were saying, much more local kind of work that you've got here?
Yeah, so it's all from Colorado, like a 5-day trip I did out there, and then the rest is from like really close to my home here in Utah, in the mountains right behind my house.
I'm so lucky to have such vibrant, or we call it autumn fall colors coming through as well. It's must be a absolutely spectacular time of year over there.
Yeah, I feel bad for you Australians because you guys like don't have seasons.
Yeah, we've got the Fagus, which is similar to what you have in what's in Patagonia with the turning
The brush, like the
the
bushes.
national the deciduous beech trees. But yeah, that's about all we have. So we don't really, unless it's the deciduous trees that have been planted, just they're not really natural. Yeah, so it is a feature, but we know we have fungi and other things that happen in autumn as well. But yeah, we are lucky in Tassie having the Fagus. If we didn't have that, then there's not much to talk about. So
I don't know if you ever get here in that time, Eric. It's like this mythical chase, because they only live in pockets that are alpine, and they usually take a bit of work to get to. And they have these incredibly fast-changing microclimates where the leaf change might be only in 2 weeks. And within that time, if you get a storm or a wind come through, they're just gone. And because they're little isolated pockets, it's really almost impossible to read which one's turning. So it's like this rainbow chase for a few weeks a year, where everyone's trying to get to the spots, and you just about miss it all the time. And they're quite narrow sort of areas, or they're quite extremely remote areas too, some of them.
Yeah, I saw a bunch of Fagus in Cradle Mountain.
Oh yeah, you would have.
Yeah. Oh, you did get there at that time. Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, well done. I haven't seen Fagus Mountain in there for years because I've missed it for years in a row.
It's very,
Yeah, they weren't orange or anything. They were green, but
oh yeah.
I was there in the summer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, when it turns, it's they're very Tolkien-like sort of plants, really, the way they sort of hug the rockscapes and have their own kind of gnarled sort of characteristics. It's How did you find the Tasmanian kind of flora as opposed to other places you've been? You're obviously very connected with the flora in the US, like here. What did you find sort of distinctive about the Tasmanian flora?
Well, my favorite thing was like all of the tree ferns and the pandanus.
Yeah, pandanus rock.
Yeah, those are super cool. I was always trying to find like nice scenes to shoot those, but didn't really.
Yeah, it's often you have to go right up into the mountains to kind of get them isolated with a nice sort of background to them. But yeah, they're very distinctive and very photogenic plants. So it's always
they look like little people. Like
yes,
it's a lot of character.
If you're shooting around really tall ones, it's like you can almost feel their presence there. It's quite an eerie feeling, actually. You
probably knew, but the Alpine flora in Tasmania, 60% of it is endemic. It's found nowhere else in the world.
Yeah, I noticed that. Like the pandanus are endemic, yeah? Yeah. So yeah, I thought the flora there was really cool, like all the rainforest and all the ferns and moss. Like I love that stuff.
Yeah, I mean it's one of the reasons why more than a third of the island is World Heritage Wilderness Area. Because it's incredibly distinctive and rare, and it is found nowhere else on the planet. So once it goes from here, it's gone from the planet.
What's happening with that the Tscharke right now?
Well, that's actually the latest project that I'm involved with my group, the Light Collective, and also for the last 10 or 15 years with the Bob Brown Foundation. So probably the frontline conservation organization that's targeted the Tscharke in particular is the Bob Brown Foundation. If you don't know who Bob Brown is, look him up. He's an incredible individual in Australian culture. He started the Greens Party, and he was in the Senate for 38 years.
One of the world's first green movements, really, too.
Yeah, he was on the front edge of the Franklin campaign as well, which kind of launched the whole Greens movement in this part of the world, and it rippled around the world. And Jarvoskis's work was very integral to that campaign initially as well, and that real strength of very tangible, real outcomes from conservation photography. So Bob Brown Foundation is very active. That they go right from the broader sort of beauty-based approach of creating connection and rapport with landscape, all the way through to frontline hardcore actions. And everything in between, and filmmaking and art projects. There's oh man, if you're over here one day, you'd love it. They have this incredible project every year. I think they had a 1 year break called the Tscharke in Motion, and a lot of the campaign work they do is based on destruction and sort of more confrontational sort of work. And yet this was actually invited up to 150 artists of all different mediums, from songwriters to printmakers to dancers and poets and writers, and as well as photographers and painters and the more literal and even dimensional and multimedia artists and jewelry and different things. And they've invited people to immerse in the landscape for a decent period of time. And a lot of these people wouldn't necessarily have the skills or confidence to be in such a more extreme environment. So they'll set up remote area camps, and they'll have on the ground guides and people that can bring them out into place and make them feel kind of safe to be out there, and to also to access places they wouldn't otherwise know how to get to. And then we build this beautiful sort of multimedia body of work out of it that has all these bridges for people to cross to connect with landscape across all those different media and different kind of voices. And then that becomes campaign material. It becomes these beautiful exhibitions that we have here that travel around Australia. It becomes the duality of different artists then creating their own connections with each other and blending bodies of work together, and performances and songwritings and books. And so it sort of takes on a life of its own, and it has a very positivist approach to the landscape. And there's no greater way, I think, to connect people to the landscape and inspire them to conserve it than actually be in it and actually experience it. So we do that sort of experientially, I guess, as photographers, but when we're sharing that work with people, we're just doing that with an image. And while there's some level of connection, there's nothing like actually physically being there. So by creating a very accessible way for all these people to actually spend quality time on country, which is a very powerful way to describe it from an
I guess to sort of be more pointed in that it's there's still a lot of mining interests going on, still a bit of logging interests, so there's still a lot of action on the ground in terms of protecting that really special area. And it's definitely probably the most sort of at-risk area. There's a bit in the northeast as well, but yeah, unfortunately the government refuses to acknowledge it as the way it should be acknowledged as part of the World Heritage Area, and as its own national park and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of continual battles, which is crazy in this day and age that we're still doing native forest logging and actually logging old growth forests when a lot of Australia burnt down in the last big bushfires. We're still cutting out trees. After losing all of that carbon store, you would be trying to protect as much as what's left there. But so that's a bit of a ongoing thing. Now, in terms of sort of the show and that kind of thing, I think we're sort of getting towards the end point there. Paul, did you have any sort of final questions you'd like to ask, or?
I'll just finish off with the time because I can tell that Eric has an actual interest in that. It's I think it's we've had some of the biggest warnings across the bow, shots across the bow with the fires in Australia, for instance, and the carbon stores going down. But we have this ongoing polarization in the Tasmanian community where we have some of the strongest green movement in the country, and we have some of the most prolific kind of mining and forestry kind of industry historically as well. And it's quite a polarized place. So I guess I don't know how you feel about where you place your imagery in terms of, there's different ways to engage people in conservation. There's the beauty approach, which is very universally accessible. There's an educational approach. There's a confrontational, challenge-based approach. And maybe just quickly, where do you see your imagery and the role in terms of its practical application and really tangibly influencing the certain places from being saved?
So I gave a workshop in Chile a few years ago because I speak Spanish as well as a second language. So I gave a workshop to the Spanish-speaking photographers there. And at the end, one of the last questions that I'll never forget was this lady asked me, how come you never take pictures of like these places that have been destroyed, you know, like a logged forest, or, you know, a burned down forest, or, you know, a mined place? Like, I think you've done some stuff like that, right? Like,
Yeah, I have.
The tailing ponds and stuff out there, like kind of like the destruction that man has imposed on the landscape. And I had never thought about why. I just always intuitively, you know, I've just always been drawn to going to nice places that haven't been destroyed. So those are naturally the photos that I take. But I thought about it for a second, and my answer was, I feel like those photographs have their place, and they are very shocking, and they're educational, and they can make us say, you know, wow, I hope I never see that happen to another place or something like that. But I think taking photographs of pristine wilderness and places that still haven't been destroyed by man or have been altered to the point of no return, they teach us the value that those places have, because a lot of people can't experience places like that unless they see our photographs. So my mission has always been to show places without any kind of man-made objects, and places that at least look very wild by excluding any kind of context that is contrary to that, because I think that helps people understand the value that places have. And then, you know, they would just feel heartbroken to see that beauty no longer exists. But then also, instead of just trying to take pretty pictures all the time and always just showcase beauty, I also like to showcase mystery. I like to showcase grotesque things that I find in nature, things that make me feel uncomfortable, strange things, because we've romanticized nature, a lot of us, you know, with all the Instagram photography, pretty sunsets, people in these places that look very inviting. And I feel like that has kind of caused a lot of disconnect for a lot of us, because we picture nature being a certain way, but that's only one small facet of nature. Nature is also very raw, very destructive, very ruthless, very indiscriminately, you know what I mean? Like, and I've been I still take pictures of things that I find beautiful, but I also try to take pictures of things that make me uncomfortable, because I feel like it's so important to give a full representation of what nature really is. Otherwise, people are going to have a distorted view of it that's been very romanticized just by being fed the same thing over and over again. We also have an obligation to teach them the other parts of nature so they can have a real relationship with it.
And then those more, you know, the destroyed landscapes, I suppose, you know, that is that even nature anymore anyway, now that it's been, there's that destruction there. And I guess, you know, if that your work or your passion is connecting with nature, it's going to be hard to connect with something that probably no longer is nature. So that's a challenge in its own right, for sure.
Yeah, we actually had Rob Blakers on a few shows that you could look back through, Eric, and we actually did one in particular on the power of photography and conservation, purely with Rob as a guest. So you might be interested in watching that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Getting his sort of sensibilities and point of view, because he's certainly probably the most prolific living photographer in Tasmania in that realm, and he's got his finger on the pulse on these areas and what's going on more than just about anyone, and probably will do till his dying day. So it's a big part of the heritage here. I'll send you something, an amazing project that Luke and I were involved with earlier this year in the Tscharke, where we actually were funded by the Bob Brown Foundation to take several amazing Aboriginal elders out on country in a very, very remote area of the Tscharke that they probably wouldn't otherwise ever get to, even themselves potentially. And we've let their voice come through in terms of the Indigenous relationship with place and the values and the spirituality and the context of what it meant to them, because the Tscharke Coast in particular is the largest, most accessible and visibly tangible record of Aboriginal culture left in the world, even relative to mainland Australia. You can't take 10 steps without literally seeing or feeling or sensing or experiencing some part of their, tens of thousands of years of history. And so, and that area was being heavily damaged by recreational four-wheel drivers, and the government was like, "Oh, we want the redneck boats to the four-wheel drivers, so we're not going to close it," and yet it's destroying tens of thousands of years of heritage. So So that's another conversation, is leaning on the cultural connection and doing that visually through photographs and video. And that's a campaign that Luke and I and another friend of ours, Andrew, are really proud of to be a part of. We haven't really released that publicly too much, but
we should put something together.
Yeah, it has actually been exhibited, and it had a really impactful, and we've actually had since that time really positive outcomes, and that area has actually been now closed to the four-wheel drive traffic legally. We can't stop them illegally going in, but yeah, another conversation itself. But yeah, on that note, we've got an audience that people may or may not have been present to your work before, Eric. So obviously we've given them a really good taste of your website. I think we might have been through every photograph just about. But do you have other avenues that you feel like people might enjoy engaging with your work? Obviously, you've got a presence on Instagram, and any other sort of places or films or things you want to direct people to engage with you or your work?
Yeah, so I've always really enjoyed seeing printed photographs. In this like digital age we're in, it's so easy to just edit your images on your computer and post them onto websites and kind of be done there. But I really love printing my work. So I came out with my first photography book ever that you mentioned in the beginning, that I had a pretty tough situation with in order to bring that to life.
I was traumatized after listening to that interview, Eric. Oh my God.
What interview was it, Paul? Just so that if people want to
Conversations with Nature. And so you've actually released an ebook before that, haven't you?
No, the interview that you were talking about was
it's Alistair Ben, Visions and Light. I think it's 29 and 30, I think, on YouTube. And the first one is a little bit more broader a conversation, but the part two is heavily focused on this incredibly wild journey that Eric's been on in terms of publishing something to I guess to honor the integrity and the value and the qualities and the aesthetic of the work that you want to be your legacy. And when that's compromised by, circumstance or misunderstandings or technical issues with calibration, because most of us have to print away from where we are physically, and that becomes a real issue when you don't have access to the physicality of the book and you don't get it sent to you until that whole process has been done and there's huge costs involved, et cetera, et cetera. And, Eric's basically is very challenging journey to remain to the integrity of the vision of what he and the standard of what he wanted to present to the world. And
well, it's your life's work. It's definitely where you'd want to be at, isn't it? So, yeah.
Still, you took a real hit to do that, and full power to you, Eric. That must have been really challenging, my friend.
Yeah, I don't regret it at all, though, because it finally turned out better than I ever expected. And it finally released like 4 months ago. I still got copies available, but if anybody's a fan of my work, I really recommend my book because
I'm going to have to get a copy for sure. I saw that Hans Strand even gave a shout out and everything. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was incredible. I didn't expect that either.
Yeah, he did. And William Neal and Alex Noriega have got written components in the book as well in terms of introducing the whole thing. So that's always a good move. But it's a stamp of I guess affinity by your peers, I guess, as well. That they're willing to stand up for your work as well.
Are you looking to do any more editions or anything like that, or like reprints, or that? I guess that's sort of something to think about down the track.
Yeah, down the road, once this sells out, I plan on having another book release in 2023 that I'm working on right now, and I'm getting pretty close to being done with that image-wise. It's this time it's going to have like almost all new images. This other one was kind of like a small retrospective of just like my, from 2016, I think, or 2015 to 2019 or so. So now, like going forward, all my new books are going to be like almost entirely brand new images that I haven't released before. So I'll focus on that one, and then maybe I'll do another reprint of this book in the future. It all just depends on how things go going forward, but definitely open to that down the road. It'd be cool to, I didn't make it to just kind of put it out there and then be done. Like I kind of want to have it available for the rest of my life, because I plan on making kind of like a book series, and it'd be cool if people could continue to own all of those.
Is your vision for that too, for them all to sort of look the same as well? So you could sort of have them on the bookshelf and you have a whole, like, you know, they will match or what have you?
Yeah, same size and similar layout, but I have some ideas to do kind of cool effects and stuff with the new ones that, you know, kind of get a bit more artistic with the production of the book as well.
Have you ever looked into the augmented reality presentation things? I don't know if you've seen that technology where you could use your phone and you know, place it over an image, and then the actual picture comes to life, or you can put a behind the scenes video or something like that to the actual thing. It looks like some really interesting technology to play with coming up. Yeah,
that'd definitely be cool to be like on the cutting edge of that with books and stuff. So
yeah, cool.
Awesome. Might see if you're interested in a book swap, Eric. Like we've got the Light Collective has a couple of beautiful books. One's on global warming, essentially a conservation-based project on the Great Barrier Reef and the coal mining industry called Black and Blue, and we have a very sensual kind of spiritual kind of conservation-based book on Karitanda Lake Eyre, which is a very remote desert sort of area of the States, and I get a sense you might appreciate the aesthetics of some of those. So we'll see later, and I'll make a point of trying to send you through a link to that beautiful video of the Aboriginal elders. Yeah, I think you'd really appreciate that, and I'll see if I can hunt down the link to Rob's show as well. So Eric also has an amazing series of online tutorials in terms of post-processing work to be done if you want to do things with class and intentionality and skill and subtlety in terms of how you apply and direct kind of the vision of your work. You know, Eric's a bit of a master at that, and he also has portfolio reviews sort of happening as well, potentially, and he runs his own private and group workshops in terms of that part of the world. As things open up, I'll certainly be looking at, I got my sights squarely on getting back over there when I can. And my nephew's actually just got a scholarship in Berkeley from New Zealand, so I'm sort of trumping him up on doing a big road trip around the States and maybe going there with him and setting him up when he's over there. So we'll see. Anything last you want to share with our audience, Eric?
I've also got a new series. So yeah, I have a lot of post-processing tutorials, but I have a new series that I started, and I released the first video earlier this year, and it's more focused on theory, which at the moment I find a bit more exciting to teach about. And that video, yeah. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing to do, and it's a lot of fun. And that one is focused on composition. So it's a video to help you learn how to take a great image in the field, so that you can apply the post-processing techniques that I teach. Because if you don't start out with something great, it's kind of irrelevant whatever you do in post-processing. So that series is focused more on like stuff to do in the field. The next video is going to be focused on lighting, but I'm still working on that. But yeah, that's a cool thing to check out, because not a lot of other people are making stuff like that.
Definitely. Absolutely. Well, yeah, and there's plenty to look through on Eric's website. So it's just
the articles are beautiful, Eric. So thoughtful and insightful and sort of innovative, and also very great reminders of the values and that are present to us in wilderness areas. You know, another conversation another time. But I have a career in wilderness therapy, so I have a very, very clear understanding of the real and tangible values for our well-being in terms of on a spiritual level and even purely on a physical level, and you're very present to that and very aware with that, and it comes through really beautifully in your writing. And I don't think there's so many people that have the level of congruence in terms of word as well as visuals, and you're one of those people, my friend. So thank you for sharing your gift with all of us.
Absolutely. And thank you for your time today. It's been a real pleasure to have you with us and pour through all of your photos and get a little bit more of an understanding about your philosophy and what makes you tick. So no, that's been really fantastic. And we'll probably need to wrap it up there. But once again, thanks for joining us. And we'll look forward to seeing a lot more of your fantastic work going forward. And also probably a book order from me as well, I think.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on, guys. It was a pleasure to finally get to talk to both of you. I've been following you both for years now, so it's cool to finally sit down and chat for a bit and get to know you better. Really admire both of you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, likewise, man. Such a beautiful couple of hours, man. Thoroughly enjoyed it, my friend. Thank you so much. Love to the family and blessings to the beautiful Four Corners. Give it my love. I miss it. And tell it I'll be back. Yeah, maybe I'll get to do something with you one day too. That'd be fun.
That'd be amazing. We should go up in a plane or something.
Oh yeah, we'll do a bit of both. You can help me stretch my legs again, and I might help you fly. How about that?
I'll carry your bags, Paul. I'd love to do that.
Or maybe we can hook up with my good mate Chris Dalbradine and see if we can get up in a microlight, because there's nothing like doing that. That's the purest aerial experience I've ever had. It's like being an eagle.
Fantastic. Well, on that note, thanks again, Eric, and have a lovely evening, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Catch you later.
Cheers, guys.